Hello and welcome to The Drowsy Architect. This is a channel where we tell the stories of the world's greatest buildings, slowly, gently, as bedtime stories for grown-ups. The narration is calm, the music is soft, and if you fall asleep before the end, that is exactly what we're here for. Tonight, we visit the Colosseum, a building where emperors won the love of a city and gladiators fought for one more day. A ruin that has outlasted every empire that tried to claim it. If you enjoy what you hear, a like or a subscribe helps us make more of these. Let us begin. If you were to stand in the center of Rome, late at night, long after the tourists have gone home and the street vendors have packed away their postcards, you would hear something remarkable. A silence. Not true silence, of course. Rome is never truly silent, but a particular kind of quiet settles over the old city after midnight, the kind of quiet that invites memory. And there, rising from the darkness like a broken crown against the sky, stands the Colosseum, 50,000 tons of stone and concrete, standing more or less where it has stood for nearly 2,000 years. Its walls are pockmarked, entire sections have crumbled away. The marble that once gleamed white under the Mediterranean sun was stripped off centuries ago, and yet it remains stubborn, dignified, patient. Tonight, we are going to tell its story, not quickly, not in bullet points or timelines. We are going to walk through it slowly, the way you might walk through the ruin itself on a warm evening, stopping now and then to run your hand along the stone and wonder about the hands that placed it there. So settle in, let the day fall away behind you. There is no rush. There is nowhere else to be, only here, only this, a story told in stone that has waited 2,000 years for you to hear it. Our story begins not with the Colosseum itself, but with a fire. The year is 64, the month is July, and Rome, the greatest city the world has ever known, is burning. It starts near the Circus Maximus, in the shops and stalls that crowd against the wooden seats of the chariot racing stadium. A small flame, perhaps a cooking fire, perhaps a lamp knocked over in the summer heat. Nobody will ever know for certain, but within hours, the fire has taken on a life of its own. Rome in the 1st century is a city of more than 1 million people. It is the largest city on earth and one of the most crowded. The poor live in timber-framed apartment blocks called insulae, rising 5 and 6 stories high, crammed together along narrow streets so tight that neighbors on opposite sides could lean out of their windows and shake hands. There is no fire brigade in the modern sense. There are no hydrants, no fire escapes. The insulae are built of wood and dried plaster and hope. The fire leaps from rooftop to rooftop. It races through alleyways. It feeds on dried goods and stored grain and the simple furnishings of ordinary Roman lives. Furniture, clothing, books, letters, the accumulated objects of thousands of households consumed in minutes. People run, they carry what they can. Children, a bundle of cloth, a small box of coins, but the fire moves faster than they do. The streets are narrow and packed with people all trying to go in the same direction. Carts overturn. The smoke is black and thick and choking. For 6 days and 7 nights, the fire burns. When it is finally over, 10 of Rome's 14 districts have been damaged. 3 have been destroyed entirely. Tens of thousands of people are homeless. Ancient temples, some dating back to the earliest days of the Republic, are gone. Libraries are gone. Shrines and monuments and public records, all turned to ash. The charred remains of what had been the greatest city in the world smoke quietly in the July heat. And the emperor, a young man of 26 named Nero, sees an opportunity. Now history has not been kind to Nero. You have probably heard that he played the fiddle while Rome burned. This is almost certainly untrue. The fiddle would not be invented for another 1,000 years. What the ancient sources actually tell us is that Nero may have sung or recited poetry while watching the flames from a safe distance. Whether this is true or simply the slander of his enemies, we cannot say. What we do know is that Nero took some genuine steps to help the displaced. He opened his own gardens as refugee camps. He arranged for food to be brought in from neighboring towns. He reduced the price of grain. These were real measures, and they should be acknowledged. But what Nero did next overshadowed all of it. He looked at the smoldering ruins in the heart of Rome, and he began to build, not homes for the displaced, not new temples or markets or public baths. No, Nero built himself a palace. He called it the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, and it was, by any measure, extraordinary. Imagine an estate stretching across 3 of Rome's 7 hills. Some estimates suggest it covered more than 300 acres. Imagine gardens so vast they contained an artificial lake, large enough to be called a sea by contemporaries, surrounded by buildings designed to look like the shoreline of a coastal city. Imagine vineyards, pastures, and woodland stocked with wild animals brought from every corner of the empire. Inside the palace itself, the rooms were vaulted and decorated with frescoes and stucco relief. Gold leaf covered the walls. Precious stones were set into the ceilings. One dining room had a rotating ceiling, or perhaps the floor rotated instead. The sources are unclear, designed to turn slowly as the guests ate, so that the room itself seemed to move. Pipes hidden in the walls could spray perfume over the diners. Flower petals drifted down from concealed panels above. And at the entrance to it all, a colossal bronze statue of the emperor himself, standing over 30 meters tall, greeting visitors with the sun's rays radiating from his crown, the Colossus Neronis. This statue, incidentally, is how the Colosseum got its name, not from the building's size, but from its proximity to this colossal statue. The amphitheatre was built nearby and came to be called the Colosseum, the place near the Colossus. The statue itself would eventually be modified, its face changed to represent the sun god's soul, and it would stand beside the amphitheatre for centuries before finally disappearing from the historical record. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Nero reportedly walked through his new palace for the first time and said, quote, "At last, I can begin to live like a human being." The people of Rome, who were still sleeping in tents among the ashes, had a rather different view. Now, let us pause here for a moment, because the story of the Colosseum is really the story of what happens when one man's vanity is replaced by another man's ambition. And to understand that, we need to watch Nero fall. It did not take long. By the year 68, just 4 years after the fire, Nero had lost the support of nearly everyone who mattered. The Senate despised him, the army had grown restless, the provinces were in revolt. Nero had spent the treasury on his golden house and on grandiose artistic projects, while the empire groaned under taxes and mismanagement. Nero fancied himself an artist, a poet, a singer, a charioteer. He performed on stage, which Romans of the upper classes considered deeply shameful. He entered singing competitions in Greece, and won every one of them because no judge was foolish enough to give the emperor anything less than first prize. He returned to Rome with 1,808 victory crowns and entered the city in the chariot that Augustus had used for his triumphs. The Senate watched in cold fury. In June of 68, the Senate declared Nero a public enemy. He fled Rome in the middle of the night, accompanied by only a handful of servants. He hid in a freedman's villa outside the city, a modest house, a far cry from the Golden Palace. And there, as the sound of approaching horsemen grew louder, he tried to summon the courage to take his own life. He could not do it alone. He needed help. A servant named Epaphroditus guided the blade. Nero was 30 years old. His last words, according to the historian Suetonius, were, "What an artist dies in me." And with that, the Julio-Claudian dynasty, the family line that had ruled Rome since Augustus, nearly a century of power, came to an end. What followed was a year of chaos. The year 69 is known to historians as the year of the four emperors, and it is worth understanding because it explains why the Colosseum was built and what it was meant to symbolize. Galba seized power first. He was old, severe, and unpopular. He tried to restore fiscal discipline after Nero's extravagance, which meant cutting the army's pay. This is never wise. He was murdered by the Praetorian Guard after just 7 months. Otho replaced him, Marcus Salvius Otho, a former friend of Nero's, a man of refined tastes and considerable vanity. He lasted barely 3 months before being defeated in battle by the legions of Vitellius. Rather than flee, Otho chose suicide. He was mourned by his soldiers, who admired his dignity in defeat. Vitellius Aulus Vitellius, a man remembered by history mostly for his enormous appetite. The ancient sources describe banquets of staggering excess, hundreds of dishes, flamingo tongues, pike livers, peacock brains. Whether these accounts are accurate or simply the propaganda of his successors is hard to say. What is certain is that Vitellius held the throne for 8 months, never commanded the loyalty of the legions, and was eventually dragged through the streets of Rome, tortured, killed, and thrown into the Tiber. Rome was tearing itself apart. 3 emperors in 18 months, each dying violently. The empire, which had seemed so permanent, so inevitable, was revealed to be fragile, held together not by institutions or ideals, but by whoever happened to control the legions at any given moment. And then, from the east, came Vespasian. Titus Flavius Vespasianus was not a glamorous man. He was not young. He was not from a noble family. His father had been a tax collector. His grandfather had been a common soldier. He had none of the polish or the breeding that Romans expected in their leaders. What he had was competence and a legionary's understanding that power must be earned, not inherited, and certainly not stolen. Vespasian had spent his career in the provinces. He had served in Britain, where he had captured more than 20 hill forts and had subdued the Isle of Wight. He had been sent to Judea to put down the Jewish revolt, a brutal and complex campaign that he prosecuted with grim efficiency. He was in Judea when news reached him of Nero's death and the chaos that followed. His soldiers proclaimed him emperor. The Eastern legions followed, then the Danube legions, then, after a brief and ugly battle in the streets of Rome, the Praetorian Guard accepted the inevitable. Vespasian arrived in Rome in the summer of 70. He had a broad face and a blunt manner and, by all accounts, a rather crude sense of humor. when a courtier suggested that the family name Flavius came from the Latin word flavus, meaning golden, Vespasian laughed. His family were not golden, they were ordinary, and he would rule as an ordinary man, not as a god in a golden house. He looked at the mess Nero had left behind: the golden house, the artificial lake, the colossal statue, the vast gardens where ordinary Romans had once lived, and he made a decision that would echo through the centuries. He would tear it down. Not all of it, but the most offensive part, the artificial lake, that great symbol of Nero's selfishness, sitting right in the valley between the Palatine, Caelian, and Esquiline hills, in the very heart of the city. Vespasian would drain it, fill it in, and on that ground, he would build something for the people. An amphitheatre, the largest the world had ever seen. It is worth pausing here to think about why this mattered so much, not just politically, but architecturally. Amphitheatres were not new in Rome. The word itself comes from the Greek, amphi meaning around, and theatron meaning a place for viewing. An amphitheatre is essentially two theatres joined together, face to face, to create an enclosed oval. The Romans did not invent the form, but they perfected it. The oldest permanent amphitheatre in the Roman world was in Pompeii, built around 70 BC. It could hold about 20,000 spectators. Other cities throughout Italy and the provinces had their own amphitheatres, some of stone, some of wood, but Rome itself, the capital of the empire, the city of 1 million people, had never had a permanent stone amphitheatre of any great size. This was partly Nero's fault. He had built a wooden amphitheatre in the Campus Martius early in his reign, but it was temporary and modest. The truth was that Rome's emperors had been more interested in their own palaces and private pleasures than in public entertainment buildings. Vespasian was going to change that, and he was going to build it on the exact spot where Nero had built his private pleasure garden. The symbolism was unmistakable. Where there had been one man's indulgence, there would now be the people's arena. Where a tyrant had kept the people out, a soldier emperor would let them in. The Roman poet Martial captured it perfectly in a poem written for the opening ceremonies. He wrote, "Where the hated palace of a savage king once gleamed, and one house took up the entire city, where the envied building of the cruel Domus Aurea rose, here now rises the amphitheatre, where Nero's lake shimmered, a marvel of public architecture now stands. Rome has been given back to herself." Construction began around 70 or 71 AD, and from the very beginning, it was an operation of staggering scale. The first challenge was the ground itself. This had been a lake. The soil was soft, waterlogged, unstable. You cannot build the largest amphitheatre in the world on a swamp. So the Roman engineers did what Roman engineers always did when faced with a problem. They solved it. They dug down deep. They excavated the lake bed and laid foundations of concrete, forming an enormous oval ring, some reaching as far as 12 meters below the surface. They built a sophisticated network of drainage channels, lined with waterproof cement, to carry away any groundwater that might seep back in. Some of these drains are still functioning today, 2,000 years later. They still carry rainwater away from the foundations. The concrete they used was a material the Romans had perfected over centuries. Roman concrete, or opus cementitium, was made from volcanic ash called pozzolana, mixed with lime and seawater. It was lighter and stronger than anything that would be produced again for more than 1,000 years. Modern engineers have studied samples of Roman concrete with electron microscopes and X-ray diffraction, and they have found something remarkable. Rather than weakening over time, as modern Portland cement does, Roman concrete actually grew stronger. The seawater that was mixed into it reacted with the volcanic ash over decades and centuries, forming rare mineral crystals called aluminium tobermorite and philipsite. These crystals grew within the concrete like a slow, silent immune system, filling cracks and reinforcing the structure from within. The Romans did not know this was happening. They simply knew that their concrete lasted, and they were right. On top of these foundations, the Romans built the skeleton of the amphitheatre, and here they used a material that would define the building's character for 2,000 years: travertine limestone. Travertine is a beautiful stone, creamy white when freshly cut. It mellows to a warm honey color over time. It is strong but workable. It can be cut into precise blocks and fitted together with remarkable accuracy. And it was available in enormous quantities at Tibur, modern-day Tivoli, about 30 kilometers east of Rome. Now imagine the logistics: 100,000 cubic meters of travertine. That is roughly enough stone to fill 40 Olympic swimming pools, each block weighing anywhere from several hundred kilograms to 8 tons. All of it had to be quarried, cut to size, loaded onto carts, and transporting 30 kilometers along a road that had to be built and maintained specifically for the purpose. The carts were pulled by oxen, slow, patient animals, plodding along at perhaps 3 kilometers per hour. The road from Tibur to Rome would have been crowded with them, hundreds of carts, maybe thousands over the years, a continuous procession of stone, moving slowly toward the city, day after day, month after month, for nearly a decade. And the workforce who did all this? The ancient sources are frustratingly vague on this point, but we know some things. The construction of the Colosseum was funded in part by the spoils from the sack of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Vespasian's son Titus had captured the city, destroyed the Second Temple, and brought back enormous quantities of gold, silver, and slaves. It is likely, though not proven, that Jewish prisoners of war formed a significant part of the workforce. Some historians estimate that as many as 12,000 captives may have worked on the building. Others put the number lower. In addition, there would have been free laborers, skilled masons and engineers who were paid for their work. Roman construction projects typically used a mix of slave labor for the heavy lifting and skilled free workers for the precision tasks. Think about them for a moment. The men who built this building, we do not know their names, not one. They cut the stone and hauled it and lifted it into place. They mixed the concrete and laid the foundations. They carved the columns and set the arches. And when it was done, they disappeared into history, leaving behind only the building itself as evidence that they ever existed. The design of the amphitheatre was, in a word, elegant, not in the decorative sense, although it was richly decorated, but elegant in the engineering sense. Every problem had been thought through, every difficulty anticipated, every solution integrated seamlessly into the whole. The building is an ellipse, not a circle, an ellipse, about 189 meters long and 156 meters wide. The ratio of these dimensions is very close to the golden ratio, which the Romans inherited from the Greeks and used extensively in their architecture. Whether this was deliberate or coincidental, we do not know, but it gives the building a visual harmony that even casual observers can feel without being able to explain. The outer wall rises to a height of 48 meters, roughly the height of a modern 12-story building. 4 levels, 80 arches on each level of the first 3 stories, 320 arches in total. And here is where the Romans showed their understanding of not just engineering, but aesthetics. Each level uses a different order of column. The ground floor has simple, sturdy Doric columns, or more precisely, the Roman version of the Doric order, called Tuscan. These are columns without decorative bases, with plain capitals, designed to convey strength and solidity. They carry the weight. The second level has the more refined Ionic order, with its distinctive scroll-shaped capitals, lighter in appearance than the Doric, but still substantial. The third level has ornate Corinthian columns, with their elaborate capitals of carved acanthus leaves, the most decorative of the 3 orders. And the top level, added later, has flat pilasters with Corinthian capitals, set against a solid wall rather than open arches. This creates a sense of closure at the top, a visual cap that stops the building from seeming to dissolve into the sky. The overall effect is one of graduated lightness, heavy at the bottom, light at the top. Your eye moves upward naturally, and the building seems to float as it rises. This was not accidental. The Romans understood instinctively what architects have codified over centuries, that heavy forms belong at the base and lighter forms at the summit. It is the same principle that would guide Gothic cathedral builders 1,000 years later. It is the same principle that makes a Greek temple satisfying to look at. The weight flows downward, the eye flows upward, and the building, despite weighing 50,000 tons, seems almost to breathe. But the most impressive thing about the Colosseum, the thing that still astonishes engineers today, is not how it looks, it is how it moves. People, we are talking about moving people. Colosseum could hold somewhere between 50,000 and 80,000 spectators. The exact number is debated endlessly by historians and archaeologists, but even the conservative estimate makes it comparable to the largest modern sports stadiums. Think of Wembley, think of the Camp Nou, think of the largest crowd you have ever been part of, and then imagine managing that crowd without electric lighting, without public address systems, without security cameras or police radios, using only the architecture itself. And the Romans could fill the Colosseum in 15 minutes and empty it in about the same time. Through a system they called the vomitoria, and yes, the word is exactly what it sounds like. The vomitoria were the exits through which the crowd was, in essence, vomited out of the building. They were wide, well-placed, and numerous, and they were the key to the entire system. There were 76 public entrances on the ground level. Each was numbered, Roman numerals carved into the stone above each arch. Your ticket, a small clay token called a tessera, bore a number and sometimes a section indicator that told you exactly which entrance to use, which staircase to climb, which corridor to follow, and which seat to take. The interior was divided into concentric rings of corridors and staircases. Each ring served a different section of seating. The corridors did not intersect. The traffic flows did not cross. A spectator entering through gate 23 would climb a different staircase and walk a different corridor than a spectator entering through gate 24. They would never meet. They would never have to push past each other. They would arrive at their seats by completely separate routes. This is crowd management at its most sophisticated. No bottlenecks, no crossflows, no points where 2 streams of people must merge or cross. The design separated streams of traffic with a precision that modern stadium architects still study and admire. The engineers who designed Wembley Stadium in London studied the Colosseum's vomitoria system. So did the designers of every major sports venue built in the last century. And the seating itself was arranged with Roman precision and Roman social hierarchy. Society was carved in stone, quite literally. The front rows, closest to the arena, the podium, were reserved for senators. Their names were sometimes carved into the stone of their seats. Behind the senators sat the equestrians, the wealthy business class of Rome. Behind them, the ordinary male citizens. And at the very top, in the highest and steepest seats, the menianum summum, sat women and the urban poor. Up there, the seats were wooden benches rather than stone, and the view of the arena was distant and steep. There were also special boxes. The emperor had his own, called the pulvinar, positioned at the center of the long side of the ellipse, the best view in the house, always in shade, always visible to the crowd, so that the emperor could be seen as well as see. Opposite the emperor's box, on the other long side, was the box reserved for the editor, the magistrates sponsoring the games, and the Vestal virgins, the priestesses of the goddess Vesta, who held a position of extraordinary honor in Roman society. And then there was the sun. Rome in summer is brutally hot, 35 degrees, sometimes 40, and 80,000 people packed into a stone amphitheatre under the Mediterranean sun would quickly become 80,000 cases of heat stroke. The stone would absorb the heat and radiate it back. The air would be still and stifling. The stench of blood and animals from the arena below would rise. The Romans solved this with fabric. They called it the velarium, a vast awning made of canvas or linen, possibly dyed in the colors of the sun, reds and yellows and oranges, that could be stretched across the top of the amphitheatre to shade the spectators below. Now think about this for a moment. The Colosseum is not a small building. The opening at the top is roughly 180 meters long and 150 meters wide. Covering it with fabric, even partially, was an engineering challenge of the highest order. The system worked like this: 240 wooden masts, each perhaps 15 meters tall, jutted upward from brackets set into the top of the outer wall. These brackets can still be seen today, small square holes in the cornice of the top level. Ropes ran from the masts to a central ring above the arena, and the canvas was stretched between them like a vast, segmented umbrella. The men who operated the velarium were not stadium workers. They were sailors, detachments from the Roman imperial fleet at Misenum, the great naval base on the Bay of Naples, were permanently stationed in Rome for this specific purpose. They lived in a barracks called the Castra Misenatium, the ruins of which have been found near the Colosseum, and on game days. They climbed the outer wall of the amphitheatre and rigged the awning with the same skill and the same teamwork they used to rig the sails of warships. It must have been a sight: 240 masts, hundreds of ropes, acres of canvas, and teams of sailors working in coordinated crews, hauling on lines and making fast, while 50,000 spectators waited below. When the velarium was deployed, it cast the arena floor and the seating in dappled shade. A gentle breeze would ripple the fabric. The temperature beneath would drop noticeably, and perfumed water, yes, perfumed water, was sometimes sprayed through the air from hidden fountains set into the upper levels. The water was scented with saffron or other aromatics, and it fell as a fine mist over the crowd, cooling the spectators and masking the smells of the arena below. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it, a vast oval of stone and marble, the murmur of 80,000 voices, the flutter of colored awnings overhead, casting moving shadows across the crowd, the scent of saffron water drifting through warm air, vendors moving through the aisles selling pastries and wine and cushions for the stone seats, and below, on the sand of the arena floor, the spectacle is about to begin. But first, let us go beneath the floor. Because under the arena, hidden from the eyes of the spectators above, lay one of the most extraordinary engineering achievements of the ancient world, the hypogeum. The word comes from the Greek, hypo meaning below, and geum meaning earth, beneath the earth, and that is exactly what it was. A subterranean world of tunnels and chambers and mechanical devices, invisible from above, that made the spectacles of the arena possible. The hypogeum was not part of the original design. When the Colosseum opened in 80 AD under the Emperor Titus, the arena floor was simply a flat surface of packed earth covered with sand. The word arena, in fact, comes from the Latin word for sand, arena. Performers and animals entered through gates at either end of the ellipse. But the Emperor Domitian, Vespasian's younger son, who took the throne after Titus's sudden death in 81, wanted more. He wanted spectacle. He wanted surprise. He wanted the impossible. He wanted animals and gladiators to appear as if by magic, rising from the ground itself, as though summoned by the gods. And so the Romans dug. Beneath the arena floor, they constructed a labyrinth. Two main corridors ran the length of the ellipse, like the spine of a great animal. These were crossed by a series of shorter passages, creating a grid of interconnected tunnels. The walls were brick. The ceilings were vaulted. Oil lamps hung from brackets, casting a dim and flickering light. Along these corridors were dozens of small rooms and chambers, holding cells for animals, secured with heavy wooden doors and iron bars, cells for condemned prisoners, waiting in the dark for their moment in the sun above. There were armories where gladiators could collect their weapons and make final preparations. There were rooms for the stage crews who built and dismantled scenery. There were storerooms for props and costumes and mechanical equipment. And there were lifts, at least 28 of them, possibly as many as 36. Vertical shafts with wooden platforms that could be raised to the level of the arena floor by teams of men operating capstans, large vertical drums wound with rope, and counterweight systems below. Imagine the process: a lion, captured in North Africa months earlier, shipped across the Mediterranean in a cage, transporting by cart to Rome, and kept in a menagerie outside the city until needed, is now loaded into a wooden cage on one of these platforms. The trapdoor above is closed. The arena floor above is covered with sand. The spectators above see nothing. On a signal, the teams below begin to turn the capstans. The ropes tighten. The platform rises slowly. The lion senses the change. It growls. The trapdoor opens. Sunlight floods in. The platform reaches the surface, and the lion is suddenly standing on the sand of the arena, blinking in the blinding light, surrounded by 80,000 screaming human beings. The effect must have been electrifying. Some of these lifts were large enough to raise not just animals, but elaborate sets. Entire landscapes could appear in the arena: trees, either real or artificial, rocks, small buildings, hillsides covered with vegetation. The spectators above would have seen the sand of the arena transform in a matter of minutes into a forest, or a desert, or a rocky hillside populated with animals. There were also ramps and tunnels that connected the hypogeum to buildings outside the Colosseum. Animals could be brought in from the nearby Ludus Magnus, the great gladiatorial training school, without ever appearing on the street. Gladiators could enter the building unseen. The condemned could be marched in from prison. Everything was hidden. Everything was managed. The spectators above saw only the finished spectacle, never the machinery that produced it. It was, in the most literal sense, theater, stage machinery, special effects, 2,000 years before Hollywood. Now, let us talk about what happened on that sand. The games, the munera and the venations, the gladiatorial combats and the animal hunts. These are what the Colosseum is famous for, and they deserve to be understood not as the mindless blood sport of popular imagination, but as what they actually were: complex, ritualized, political, expensive, and yes, often brutal. A day at the Colosseum was a structured affair. It followed a program advertised in advance on painted notices around the city, and it typically lasted from dawn to dusk. The morning began with the pompa, the grand procession. The editor, the man sponsoring the games, entered first. If he was a magistrate seeking re-election, this was his moment. He wore his finest toga, he waved to the crowd. Behind him came the gladiators, marching in pairs or in groups, their armor gleaming, their weapons polished. Musicians played, dancers performed, carts carried exotic animals in cages. It was a parade, a spectacle before the spectacle. And it set the tone for the day. After the pompa came the venations, the animal hunts. These occupied the morning program and were enormously popular. Exotic beasts from every corner of the empire were brought to Rome and displayed, and then killed in the arena. Lions from North Africa, bears from the forests of Germany and Caledonia, elephants from the borders of India, leopards from Syria, rhinoceroses from the Upper Nile, crocodiles from Egypt, ostriches from the southern deserts, hippos from the rivers of Africa, giraffes, aurochs, the great wild cattle of Europe, and many others. The logistics of acquiring these animals were extraordinary. Teams of professional hunters called venators, the same word used for the arena performers, operated throughout the empire. They captured animals alive, which was far more difficult and dangerous than simply killing them. The animals then had to be transporting, in cages, by cart and by ship, sometimes for thousands of miles. To Rome, many died in transit. Those that survived were kept in menageries outside the city until needed. The impact on wildlife was devastating. The Romans hunted the North African elephant to extinction. The North African lion was wiped out. The Barbary bear disappeared. Hippos were eliminated from the Lower Nile. The appetite of the arena was insatiable, and it consumed entire species. In the arena itself, the hunts were staged with theatrical flair. The arena floor might be decorated to resemble a forest or a desert. Scenery would rise from the hypogeum. Animals would be released from trapdoors. Professional venators would fight them with spears and bows, demonstrating skill and courage before dispatching them. Sometimes the animals fought each other, bull against bear, elephant against lion. These mismatched combats were called silvae. After the forests, they were supposed to represent. At midday, the program shifted, and this was the darkest part of the day. The midday interval was reserved for public executions. Criminals condemned to death, often slaves or prisoners of war, or those found guilty of particularly heinous crimes. were brought out and dispatched in various ways. Some were simply executed by the sword, others were thrown to the animals, a punishment called damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. This was considered one of the most degrading forms of execution, and it was reserved for the lowest classes. No Roman citizen could be sentenced to it. Sometimes the executions were staged as mythological tableaus. A condemned man might be forced to play the role of Orpheus, dressed in costume, surrounded by tame animals, playing a lyre before a bear was released to kill him. Another might be dressed as Icarus and raised on a platform high above the arena before the platform was dropped and he fell to his death. These were cruel, theatrical, and designed to entertain a crowd that was waiting for the afternoon's main event. The philosopher Seneca, who attended the games during the reign of Nero, wrote with distaste about the midday executions. He said the crowd was thin at that hour, that many spectators had left to have lunch and would return only for the afternoon. He described the violence as purposeless, without the skill or courage of the gladiatorial bouts. In the morning, he wrote, men are thrown to lions and bears. At noon, they are thrown to the spectators. It is worth sitting with that quote for a moment, even in a society that accepted the games as normal. Some voices were troubled by what they saw. And the main event, of course, was the gladiators. The gladiators of Rome are among the most misunderstood figures in history. Popular culture has given us the image of slaves and prisoners, forced to fight to the death for the amusement of a bloodthirsty mob. The movie Gladiator, the television series Spartacus, countless novels and comic books, they all draw on this image. And while there is truth in it, it is far from the whole story. Yes, many gladiators were slaves or prisoners of war or criminals sentenced to the arena. The gladiatorial schools, the ludi, bought them in bulk. They had no choice. They fought or they died. But by the height of the empire, in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD, a significant number of gladiators were volunteers, free men, and even some women who chose the arena for the money, the fame, or the thrill. They signed contracts called auctoramentum, binding themselves to a gladiatorial school for a fixed period, usually 5 years. They gave up their freedom, their legal rights, their social standing. A free man who entered the arena became infamies. Of ill repute, excluded from political life and respectable society. In return, they received expert training at a ludus, a gladiatorial school. The largest in Rome was the Ludus Magnus, located just east of the Colosseum and connected to it by an underground tunnel. The ruins of the Ludus Magnus can still be seen today, and they include a small practice arena where gladiators trained under the watchful eye of the doctors, the instructors, each of whom specialized in a particular fighting style. The gladiators received the best food available, a high-protein diet of barley and beans and dried fruit, designed to build a thick layer of subcutaneous fat. This fat served as armor of a sort. It meant that surface cuts, which were common and unavoidable, would slice through fat rather than muscle or vital organs. The gladiators were sometimes mockingly called hordearii, barley men, because of their diet. They received medical care from some of the finest doctors in Rome. Galen, one of the most famous physicians in history, whose writings would influence medicine for more than 1,000 years, began his career as a doctor at a gladiatorial school in Pergamum. He later wrote that the experience taught him more about anatomy and wound treatment than anything else in his training. And if they survived and won, gladiators received prize money, public adoration, and a fame that in some ways resembled that of modern sports stars. Their images appeared on pottery and lamps and mosaics. Children played with gladiator figurines. Women, according to the ancient sources, found them intensely attractive. Graffiti from Pompeii describes one gladiator as the sigh of the girls and another as the delight of all the women. Gladiators were organized into types, each with its own weapons, its own armor, and its own fighting style. Let us meet them. The murmillo, named perhaps after the Greek word for a type of fish, murmur, the murmillo carried a gladius, a short Roman sword, and a large rectangular shield called a scutum. He wore a broad-brimmed helmet with a high crest, greaves on one leg, and a padded arm guard. He was the heavy infantryman of the arena, strong, defensive, patient. The Thraces, or Thracian, named after the warriors of Thrace, a region in modern-day Bulgaria and Turkey. The Thraces fought with a curved sword called a sika, designed for hooking around the edge of a shield and striking from unexpected angles. He carried a small square shield and wore greaves on both legs and a helmet with a wide brim and a tall curved crest. The hoplomachus, another heavily armed fighter carrying a spear and a short sword with a small round shield. His fighting style was based on the Greek hoplite tradition, and he was often matched against the murmillo. The secutor, the pursuer, a specialist type designed to fight the retiarius. The secutor wore a smooth, egg-shaped helmet with tiny eye holes to prevent the retiarius's trident from catching. He carried a short sword and a large shield. His helmet was streamlined, with no crest or projection, nothing for a net to snag on. And the retiarius, the net fighter, perhaps the most unusual gladiator type. He carried a weighted net, a trident, and a small dagger. He wore almost no armor, just a shoulder guard on one arm and a padded sleeve. He relied entirely on speed, agility, and the hope of entangling his opponent in the net before moving in for the kill. The retiarius was a crowd favorite precisely because of this vulnerability. He looked almost naked compared to his armored opponents. Every bout felt dangerous. Every moment could be his last. And when he succeeded, when he cast the net and it landed true, wrapping around his opponent's sword arm or catching the crest of his helmet, the crowd erupted. Bouts were carefully matched. A murmillo would typically fight a Thrace or a hoplomachus. A retiarius would face a secutor. These were not random brawls, they were structured, in the sense that the matchups were designed to create exciting, balanced contests between different fighting philosophies. Speed against strength, range against armor, offense against defense. And here is something that may surprise you. Most gladiatorial bouts did not end in death. Think about it from an economic perspective. Training a gladiator took years. Feeding, housing, and equipping him cost a fortune. A well-trained, popular gladiator was worth an enormous sum to his owner. Killing him was like burning money. Most bouts ended when one fighter was wounded, or exhausted, or simply outmatched. The losing gladiator could appeal for mercy by raising a finger, the index finger of his left hand, and dropping his shield. This was called submissio. The fighting stopped. The crowd weighed in with shouts and gestures, and the editor, the man sponsoring the games, made the final decision. If the loser had fought bravely, if he had given good entertainment, the crowd would call for missio, release, spare him. He would live to fight another day. If the crowd felt he had fought poorly, if he had been cowardly or dull, or if the sponsor wanted to make a grand gesture to please the mob, the loser would receive the iugulum. the throat cut, the killing blow. Studies of gladiatorial grave have confirmed this picture. At a gladiatorial cemetery in Ephesus, in modern-day Turkey, archaeologists examined the bones of 67 gladiators. Most showed signs of healed wounds, indicating that they had survived multiple bouts. The death rate has been estimated at somewhere between 1 in 5 and 1 in 10, depending on the period and the type of bout. Dangerous, certainly, but not the guaranteed death sentence of popular imagination. The famous thumbs up, thumbs down gesture that we associate with this moment is probably a myth, or at least a misunderstanding. The ancient sources describe a gesture called pollis verso, turned thumb, but they do not specify which direction. Some historians believe that a closed fist with the thumb hidden inside meant mercy, while an extended thumb of any kind, up, down, or sideways, meant death. Others suggest the opposite. The truth is, we simply do not know. The image of the emperor's thumb pointing down is a creation of 19th century painters, most notably Jean-Léon Gérôme, whose 1872 painting Pollis Verso cemented the image in popular culture. Among the thousands of gladiators who fought in the Colosseum over 4 centuries, a few names have come down to us. Let us spend a moment with them. They have earned it. There was Flamma, a Syrian by birth, probably captured in war and sold into a ludus. He fought 34 times in the arena, won 21 bouts outright, drew 9, lost 4, but was granted missio each time, and he was offered his freedom, the coveted rudies, the wooden sword that symbolized a gladiator's release from service. 4 separate times, he refused it. Every time, he chose to keep fighting. We do not know why. The sources do not say. Perhaps he loved the arena. Perhaps he had nowhere else to go, no family, no trade, no life outside the ludus. Perhaps the roar of the crowd was the closest thing to love he had ever known. Or perhaps, after so many years, the arena was simply home. He died in the arena, his 34th bout. His tombstone was found in Sicily. It reads simply, Flamma Secutor, lived 30 years, fought 34 times, won 21, drew 9, was granted missio 4 times. A Syrian by nation. There was Spiculus, a favorite of Nero himself. So great was Nero's admiration that he gave Spiculus estates and properties, wealth that would have been extraordinary for a free man, let alone a gladiator. When Nero was fleeing Rome in his final hours, desperate and afraid, he sent for Spiculus. He wanted the greatest gladiator in Rome to deliver the killing blow. He considered it a fitting end, worthy of his status as an artist and a performer. Spiculus could not be found in time. Nero died by his own trembling hand. And there were Verus and Priscus. Their bout was described by the poet Martial and is one of the only gladiatorial combats in history that we have a detailed eyewitness account of. They fought in the Colosseum during the inaugural games of 80 AD. The bout went on and on. Neither man could gain the advantage. The crowd began to chant, not for one or the other, but for both. They wanted both men to win, both men to live. In the end, the Emperor Titus, who was presiding over the games, raised his hand. He declared them both victors. Both received the palm branch of victory. Both received the rudies, the wooden sword of freedom. Both walked out of the arena as free men to thunderous applause. It is a small moment, a footnote in the history of an empire, one bout among thousands, but there is something in it, something that reaches across 2,000 years and touches something recognizably, unmistakably human. 2 men fighting for their lives, and a crowd moved by their courage to demand that both be spared. An emperor, who held absolute power over every life in that arena, choosing mercy. Let us step back now and return to the building itself, because we have not yet spoken properly about the day it opened. Vespasian did not live to see his amphitheatre completed. He died in the year 79 of natural causes, which was something of an achievement for a Roman emperor. On his deathbed, feeling himself slipping away, he made a joke. He said, "Puto Deus fio," which translates roughly as, "Dear me, I think I am becoming a god," a dry reference to the Roman custom of deifying dead emperors, the sense of humor of a tax collector's son, right to the end. The same year Vespasian died, Vesuvius erupted and buried Pompeii. The empire was not short of disasters. It was Vespasian's eldest son, Titus, who completed the building and presided over its opening. Titus was everything his father was not: handsome, charming, popular. The Romans called him the delight of mankind. He had led the siege of Jerusalem. He had watched the temple burn, and now he would open the greatest entertainment venue the world had ever seen. The inaugural games took place in the year 80 AD, and they lasted 100 days. 100 days of spectacle. Think about that. More than 3 months of games, from dawn to dusk, every single day. The logistics alone are staggering. The animals, the gladiators, the food for 80,000 spectators, the sand that had to be replaced on the arena floor each day, raked smooth, stained with blood, and then clean again. The ancient sources, always prone to exaggeration, claim that 9,000 animals were killed during the inaugural games. Some historians consider this plausible. Others think it an overstatement. But even if we halve the number, it remains staggering. There were gladiatorial combats, animal hunts on a scale never seen before, public executions, athletic contests, and, according to some sources, Normatia, naval battles. The arena was flooded with water, and small ships were floated on the surface, crewed by condemned prisoners or trained performers who fought to the death. Now, the logistics of flooding the Colosseum's arena are hotly debated. Some historians believe it happened only during the inaugural games, before Domitian built the hypogeum beneath the floor. Once the underground chambers and lifts were installed, flooding would have been impossible. Others argue that the accounts of Normatia in the Colosseum are confused with events at other venues, such as the artificial lake that Augustus had built for similar spectacles. In any case, the inaugural games were a triumph. The people of Rome had their amphitheatre, and Titus, who would reign for only 2 more years before dying suddenly at the age of 41, possibly poisoned by his brother Domitian, had secured his place in history as the emperor who opened the Colosseum. Let us take a breath here, a long, slow breath. We have been in the arena, we have been beneath it, we have watched the games and met the gladiators, we have climbed the seats and sheltered under the velarium, we have listened to the crowd and smelled the saffron water. But a building is more than its spectacles. A building is also the ordinary moments, the quiet ones, the ones that do not make it into the history books. Think about the vendors, the men and women who sold food and drink to the spectators on game days. Pastries, wine, olives, roasted meat on skewers, fruit, nuts. They worked the aisles and the corridors, calling out their wares. The same way vendors do at football matches today, they must have known the building intimately, every staircase, every shortcut, every alcove where you could rest your tray for a moment and catch your breath. Think about the cleaning crews. The men who came in after the games, after the crowd had gone home, and cleaned the blood and the animal dung and the dropped food from the arena floor and the seating areas. They raked the sand, they swept the corridors, they scrubbed the stone seats, they worked by torchlight or perhaps by the last light of the setting sun, and they made the building ready for the next day's games. Think about the animals, the thousands of animals who spent their last hours in the darkness of the hypogeum, the lions pacing in their cages, the bears moaning, the elephants swaying. They did not understand where they were. They did not understand what was about to happen. They knew only darkness and noise and the smell of blood from above. Think about the families who came to the games together. Parents and children, grandparents, friends, they made a day of it. They brought cushions for the stone seats. They wore their best clothes. They argued about which gladiator would win. They ate and drank and cheered and booed. And at the end of the day, they walked home through the streets of Rome, buzzing with excitement, recounting the best moments. The way families today recount the highlights of a football match or a concert on the drive home. The Colosseum was, for the people of Rome, normal. That is the thing that is hardest to grasp. It was not a monument. It was not a museum. It was not a place of horror or wonder. It was entertainment. It was where you went on game day. It was as ordinary and as central to Roman life as television is to ours. And perhaps that is the most unsettling thing of all. There is another side to the Colosseum that we should not leave unspoken, the political side, because the games were never just entertainment, they were power. In the Roman Republic, before the emperors, ambitious politicians had sponsored games as a way of winning votes. Julius Caesar was one of the first to understand the political potential of the arena. He staged games of unprecedented lavishness, and the people loved him for it. His rivals watched and learned. Under the emperors, the games became an essential tool of governance. The phrase bread and circuses, panem et circenses, comes from the Roman satirist Juvenal, who used it to describe the two things that kept the Roman populace docile: free grain and free entertainment. As long as the people were fed and amused, they would not revolt. The Colosseum was the circus, the greatest circus of them all. An emperor who sponsored magnificent games was popular. An emperor who cancelled them or reduced their frequency risked unrest. The games were a social contract, a bargain between ruler and ruled. You give us spectacle, and we give you obedience. But the games were also a place where the emperor was exposed, visible, accountable, in a way that he was nowhere else. In the arena, the crowd could address the emperor directly. They could chant demands, they could boo, they could express displeasure in a way that would be dangerous anywhere else. The Colosseum was, in a strange sense, one of the few democratic spaces in imperial Rome, not a democracy of votes, but a democracy of noise. Emperors ignored the crowd at their peril. Suetonius records that the Emperor Tiberius, who disliked the games and reduced their frequency, was deeply unpopular. Caligula, who enjoyed the games but sometimes made capricious decisions that angered the crowd, was mocked and threatened from the stands. The arena was a mirror. It showed the emperor what the people thought of him, and some emperors did not like what they saw. The economics of the games was staggering. Sponsoring a day of games in the Colosseum was ruinously expensive. The cost of gladiators alone could bankrupt a wealthy man. Animals had to be imported from the far reaches of the empire. The arena had to be prepared. The staff had to be paid. Food and drink had to be provided for the crowd, sometimes free of charge. A single day of modest games might cost the equivalent of several £1,000,000 in modern money. The great imperial spectacles, the 100-day inaugurals, the triumphal celebrations could cost tens of millions. The wealth of conquered nations was poured into the sand of the arena. And yet the money flowed because the games were not an expense. They were an investment in loyalty, in stability, in the fiction that Rome was eternal and its emperor was generous and its people were the most fortunate on earth. The gladiators themselves were commodities, bought and sold like livestock. A novice gladiator might be worth a few thousand sesterces. A veteran champion could be worth hundreds of thousands. Some gladiators were so valuable that their owners insured them, the way a modern football club might insure a star player. There were agents and managers and talent scouts. There were training facilities and medical staff and retirement plans of a sort for those who survived long enough to earn their freedom. There was an entire industry built around the arena, an economy of blood, and Rome was addicted to it. Let us speak for a moment about the women of the Colosseum. Not only the women in the audience, sitting in the upper tiers, watching from the greatest distance, as Roman social custom decreed, but the women who fought. Yes, there were female gladiators. The ancient sources mention them, sometimes with disapproval, sometimes with fascination. They were called gladiatrices, though the Romans had no single established term for them. A marble relief from Halicarnassus in modern-day Turkey, dating to the 2nd century AD, shows two female gladiators facing each other. They are armed and armored. They are identified by their stage names, Amazon and Achilia. The inscription records that they were both granted missio, both released honorably after their bout. They fought, and they survived, and someone thought it worth commemorating in stone. The Emperor Domitian staged fights between women, sometimes by torchlight at night, adding an element of spectacle and transgression that the crowd apparently enjoyed. Juvenal, the same satirist who coined bread and circuses, wrote scathingly about women in the arena. He considered it an affront to decency, but his very scorn is evidence that it happened. In 200 AD, the Emperor Septimius Severus banned women from fighting as gladiators. The ban itself tells us that they had been fighting in significant enough numbers to require a ban. After that date, female gladiators disappear from the record. They are ghosts now, a marble relief, a few lines of poetry, a passing mention in a historian's text, but they were there, in the arena, under the sun, fighting for their lives, the same as the men. For 350 years, more or less, the Colosseum served its purpose. Emperors came and went, dynasties rose and fell, the building endured. Some emperors left their mark on it. Domitian, Vespasian's younger son, built the hypogeum and added the upper gallery. He was a controlling, suspicious man who insisted on attending the games personally and making the life-or-death decisions himself, taking obvious pleasure in the power. Commodus, who reigned from 177 to 192, took things much further. Commodus was obsessed with the arena, not content to watch. He insisted on fighting in it. He appeared as a gladiator hundreds of times by some accounts, dressed as Hercules, wielding a club, and fought bouts that were carefully rigged to ensure his victory. He killed animals in the arena, ostriches, lions, elephants, giraffes. He once killed 100 lions in a single day from the safety of a raised platform. He beheaded an ostrich and carried its head to the senators' seats, grinning, swinging the head, as if to say, "You could be next." The senators sat frozen with fear and bit their lip to keep from laughing, because laughing at the emperor was also death. He charged the state treasury an enormous fee for each of his appearances, 1,000,000 sesterces per bout, according to Cassius Dio. This was money taken from the people to pay the emperor to play at being what real gladiators were forced to be. The Senate was appalled, the people were unsettled, and the real gladiators, forced to lose deliberately to the emperor, must have found it deeply humiliating. Commodus was eventually assassinated, strangled in his bath by a wrestler named Narcissus, on the last day of the year 192. Septimius Severus repaired the building after a devastating fire in 217, caused by a lightning strike that damaged the upper levels and the wooden seating. The repairs took more than 2 decades to complete. Further restorations were carried out by later emperors, Gordian III, Philip the Arab, Decius, each patching and mending a building that was showing its age. But by the 4th century, the world was changing, and the Colosseum, slowly, quietly, was changing with it. Christianity, that is the great turning point, the hinge on which the story of the Colosseum turns. For the first 3 centuries of the Roman Empire, Christianity was a small and often persecuted movement. Christians were among those thrown to the beasts in the arena. They were among those executed at midday for the crowd's entertainment. The Colosseum, for early Christians, was a place of martyrdom and horror, a place where their brothers and sisters had been torn apart by animals while a crowd cheered. But in the year 313, the Emperor Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, granting tolerance to Christians throughout the empire, and then, slowly at first, and then with gathering speed, Christianity transformed the Roman world. By the end of the 4th century, it was the official state religion. Pagan temples were closed, pagan rituals were banned, and the new Christian sensibility, with its emphasis on mercy, compassion, and the sanctity of human life, was fundamentally at odds with the spectacles of the arena. The gladiatorial games did not end overnight. There was no single dramatic edict. The process was gradual, reluctant, resisted. The games were too popular, too deeply embedded in Roman culture, too important as a tool of political patronage and crowd control. But they faded. Emperor after emperor placed restrictions on them. Constantine himself banned the sentencing of criminals to the arena in 325, though the ban was not consistently enforced. Honorius banned gladiatorial combat entirely in 399, or perhaps 404. The sources disagree. There is a story, possibly apocryphal, about a monk named Telemachus. He is said to have leapt into the arena during a gladiatorial bout to try to stop the fighting. The crowd, enraged by the interruption, stoned him to death. The Emperor Honorius, so the story goes, was so moved by the monk's sacrifice that he banned the games permanently. Whether this story is true or a later Christian invention designed to provide a dramatic narrative for the end of the games, we do not know. What we do know is that the gladiatorial combats ceased sometime in the early 5th century. The animal hunts, the venations, continued for a while longer. The last recorded animal hunt in the Colosseum was held in the year 523, under the Ostrogothic King Theoderic. After that, the arena fell silent. And for the first time in more than 400 years, no blood was spilled on the sand of the Colosseum. What happens to a building when it loses its purpose? This is one of the most interesting questions in architecture and one of the saddest, because a building is not just stone and mortar, it is an idea, a function, a reason to exist. Take away the reason, and the building becomes a shell, a monument to something that no longer is, an answer to a question that nobody is asking anymore. The Colosseum, without its games, began a long, slow, complicated afterlife. At first, it simply sat there, too large to demolish, too solid to ignore, too expensive to maintain. The Roman population was declining. The empire in the West had collapsed in 476. Rome was no longer the capital of anything. It was a city in decline, its population falling from 1 million to perhaps 50,000. The great buildings of the imperial era stood like elderly relatives at a shrinking family reunion, too proud to leave, too tired to speak. In the 6th century, a small chapel was built into the Colosseum's structure. Some of the arched spaces beneath the seating were converted into workshops and storage rooms. People moved in, not as spectators, but as residents. Families set up homes in the corridors and stairways of the great amphitheatre. Imagine that for a moment, waking up in the morning inside the Colosseum, stepping outside your doorway, which was once an entrance to the second tier of seating, and looking out across the arena where 50,000 people once watched gladiators fight, hanging your washing from a stone bracket that once held a mast for the velarium, cooking dinner in a room that once stored the weapons of condemned men. History does not record what these people thought about their home, whether they knew what it had been, whether they cared. They were simply living, in the most practical way they could, in the ruins of a civilization that had built things too large to disappear. There is something deeply human about this, the way we nest, the way we make homes in the strangest places, the way we hang curtains and light fires and raise children, regardless of where we find ourselves. The Colosseum was never designed for habitation. It was designed for spectacle, and yet, when the spectacle ended, life moved in, as it always does, as it always will. For centuries, the Colosseum was a living neighborhood. A census from the 11th century records that the area in and around the amphitheatre was home to a community of craftsmen and small traders. There were lime kilns, where the marble stripped from the building was burned to make morite. There were blacksmiths, who may have used the iron extracted from the walls. There were tanners and dyers and weavers. The great amphitheatre had become a village. Religious life found its way in too, not just the small chapel of the 6th century, but eventually multiple small churches and religious houses were established within the structure. A confraternity dedicated to the care of the sick used part of the building as a hospital. Pilgrims came to pray among the arches. The Colosseum was alive, not as it had been in the days of the games, but in a quieter way, a human way, a way that had nothing to do with emperors or gladiators or spectacle, and everything to do with the simple business of living. In the 12th century, the Frangipane family, one of Rome's powerful noble clans, turned the Colosseum into a fortress. They fortified the southern section, building walls and towers among the ancient arches. The Anibaldi family controlled another section. For decades, the Colosseum was fought over, not by gladiators, but by rival Roman families vying for control of the city. This was medieval Rome, a place of feuds and factions. The ancient monuments were simply part of the landscape. The theatre of Marcellus became a palace. The mausoleum of Augustus became a fortress. The Pantheon became a church. And the Colosseum, the greatest amphitheatre ever built, became a combination of military stronghold, residential neighborhood, and workshop district. And then the earthquakes came. Rome sits on a seismically active region. The earth moves, it always has, and the Colosseum, for all its engineering genius, was not immune. A major earthquake in 847 caused significant damage to the southern side of the outer wall. Huge sections of travertine crashed to the ground, the arches cracked, the columns shattered. Another earthquake in 1231 caused further damage, and a third, the most devastating, in 1349, brought down much of the remaining outer wall on the south and west sides. If you visit the Colosseum today, you will notice immediately that the building is not complete. The outer wall is largely intact on the north side, rising to its full 4 stories, but on the south side, it is largely missing. This asymmetry gives the building its distinctive profile, its quality of being both whole and broken at the same time. And what the earthquakes did not destroy, the Romans themselves carried away. Because here is the painful truth about the Colosseum's middle centuries. For hundreds of years, it was used as a quarry, a free source of pre-cut building stone. After each earthquake, the fallen blocks were carted off and reused in other buildings. But it was not just fallen stones that were taken. Throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, people actively stripped the Colosseum for material. The iron clamps that held the travertine blocks together, sometimes weighing as much as 300 kilograms of iron per clamp, were prized out with crowbars and chisels. The holes left behind by this process are the distinctive pockmarks you can see in the stone today. Nearly every surface of the Colosseum is covered with these small square holes, each one a scar where an iron clamp was torn out. The marble cladding was stripped off entirely and burned to make lime for mortar. The travertine was carted away by the wagon load. The lead that lined the drainage channels was melted down. And some of Rome's most famous buildings contain the bones of the Colosseum within their walls. The Palazzo Barberini, the Palazzo Venezia, the Palazzo Cancelleria, the steps of St. Peter's Basilica, the port of Ripetta. Pope Nicholas V, in the mid-15th century, authorized the removal of 2,200 cartloads of travertine from the Colosseum in a single year. Pope Alexander VI gave permission for the Colosseum to be used as a quarry by anyone who wanted stone. Pope Julius II, the same pope who commissioned Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling, used Colosseum stone for the construction of the new St. Peter's Basilica. It is a strange irony. The building that had been raised to replace Nero's vanity was now being dismantled to feed the vanity of popes. But not everyone saw the Colosseum as simply a source of building material, and in the centuries that followed, something changed, slowly, almost imperceptibly. A new way of seeing old buildings was born. In the early 18th century, the Romantic movement was stirring in Europe. Poets and painters and philosophers began to look at ancient ruins differently, not as useless relics, not as quarries, but as monuments to the passage of time, as evidence of human ambition confronted by human mortality. the broken arch, the crumbling wall, the wildflower growing from a crack in ancient stone, these became symbols of something profound, the beautiful melancholy of impermanence. And no ruin in Europe captured this sensibility more powerfully than the Colosseum. Artists flocked to it. Giovanni Battista Piranesi made his famous engravings of the interior, dramatizing the scale and the darkness and the overwhelming weight of the stone. The German painter Christoph Heinrich Nietzsche drew it bathed in moonlight. Thomas Cole, the founder of the Hudson River School of American Painting, painted it in golden sunset light, with tiny human figures dwarfed by the arches. Writers came too, and their words have survived alongside the stone. Lord Byron visited in 1817 and wrote some of his most famous lines about it. He was quoting an old prophecy attributed to the Venerable Bede, an Anglo-Saxon monk of the 8th century, but he gave the words a power and a romance that captured the imagination of Europe. While stands the Colosseum, Rome shall stand. When falls the Colosseum, Rome shall fall, and when Rome falls, the world. Charles Dickens visited in 1845. He wrote in his travel book Pictures from Italy that the Colosseum was the most impressive, the most stately, the most solemn, grand, majestic, mournful sight conceivable. He described wandering through it alone at night, by torchlight, and feeling overwhelmed by the weight of 2,000 years pressing down on him from every side. Henry James came and wrote about it in his novel Daisy Miller, using the moonlit Colosseum as the setting for a pivotal scene. Mark Twain visited and, being Mark Twain, was characteristically irreverent about the tourist experience but moved by the building itself. Goethe had come before all of them in 1786 and had written that the Colosseum was so vast that the memory could not hold it, that you left and returned and found it larger every time. And thousands of ordinary travelers making the grand tour that was fashionable among wealthy young Europeans stood in the arena for the first time and felt something, a connection, a presence, as though the stones themselves were trying to speak. Meanwhile, nature was reclaiming the building, and doing so in a most extraordinary way. By the 18th and 19th centuries, the Colosseum had become one of the richest botanical habitats in Europe. Plants grew from every crack and crevice. Wildflowers cascaded from the upper arches. Shrubs and even small trees had taken root in the rubble-filled corridors. In 1855, a British botanist named Richard Deakin published a remarkable book called Flora of the Colosseum of Rome. He had spent years cataloguing every plant species growing in the ruins. He found 420 species, 420. Many of them were not native to Italy, not even native to Europe. How had they arrived? Seeds carried in the fur, the feathers, and the dung of the thousands of exotic animals that had been brought to Rome for the games. A lion from North Africa might carry seeds from the Atlas Mountains in its coat. An elephant from India might deposit seeds from the banks of the Indus in its droppings. Over centuries, these seeds had germinated in the stonework of the Colosseum and grown into plants that had no business being in Italy. The Colosseum had become, quite accidentally, a botanical garden, a living record of the ancient trade routes that had once brought the entire known world to Rome's doorstep. Deakin argued passionately for the preservation of these plants as a unique ecological treasure. Sadly, many were removed in later restoration efforts, but some remain, and the story of their journey from distant continents to the cracks in a Roman wall is one of the most quietly beautiful stories the Colosseum has to tell. It was the popes, ironically, who eventually saved the Colosseum from the quarriers who had been stripping it for centuries. In 1749, Pope Benedict XIV declared the Colosseum a sacred site. He claimed, without particularly strong historical evidence, that it was a place where Christian martyrs had been put to death for their faith. He erected stations of the cross around the arena floor and consecrated it as a church. Whether or not his historical claims were accurate, and most modern historians are skeptical, the effect was immediate and dramatic. You cannot quarry a church. The stone stripping stopped. The Colosseum was saved, not by architects or preservationists, but by a pope with a useful fiction. Subsequent popes continued the work of preservation. Buttresses were built against the outer wall to prevent further collapse. The most visible of these, the enormous triangular brick buttress on the east side, was built by Pope Pius VII in 1805. Another was added by Pope Leo XII in 1826. These buttresses are not beautiful. They are massive, plain, utilitarian. They look like crutches propping up an old warrior, but they did their job. They held the Colosseum together through 2 more centuries of earthquakes and weather, long enough for the modern world to develop the tools and the will to save it properly. Let us move forward now, through the centuries, to the Colosseum as it exists today. The first serious archaeological excavations of the arena began in the 1870s, after Rome became the capital of a newly unified Italy in 1871. For the new nation, the Colosseum was more than an old building. It was a symbol, a link to the glorious Roman past, a statement of national identity. The arena floor, which had been buried under centuries of debris and earth, was gradually cleared, and what emerged was a revelation. The hypogeum, Domitian's underground labyrinth, exposed for the first time in more than 1,000 years. Archaeologists found the walls of the underground chambers still standing, blackened by centuries of damp and soil. They found the shafts of the lifts. They found animal bones and iron cage fittings and fragments of wooden machinery. They found graffiti scratched into the walls by gladiators and workers, names and symbols and crude drawings that were suddenly, after 2 millennia of darkness, exposed to the light. It was as though the building had been holding its breath, waiting to exhale its secrets. Throughout the 20th century, restoration work continued. Engineers stabilized the walls with steel and concrete reinforcement, carefully hidden from view. Archaeologists catalogued every fragment of stone and iron and bone. The Italian government spent hundreds of millions of euros on preservation, cleaning the travertine, repairing the arches, making the building safe for the millions of tourists who now visited each year. In 2021, a major project was announced to install a retractable floor over the hypogeum, a modern arena floor made of lightweight materials that could be opened and closed, allowing visitors to see the underground chambers below while also restoring the building's original proportions. For the first time in nearly 2,000 years, it would be possible to stand on the floor of the Colosseum and look across the arena as the gladiators once did. There is one more thing worth knowing about the modern Colosseum, something that connects its past to its present in a way that is both practical and deeply symbolic. Since 1999, the Colosseum has been used as a symbol in the global campaign against the death penalty. Whenever a death sentence is commuted anywhere in the world, or whenever a country abolishes capital punishment, the Colosseum is illuminated in gold. The lights change from their usual warm white to a brighter gold, and the building glows against the Roman sky like a beacon. It is a striking choice. A building where thousands were put to death, now used to celebrate the saving of life. A place of execution transformed into a symbol of mercy. The same arena where the crowd once bayed for blood, now standing silent and golden, marking the moment when someone, somewhere, was spared. The Colosseum does not judge. It does not take sides. It simply stands and allows each generation to project onto its stones whatever meaning they need. For the Romans, it meant power. For the medievals, it meant shelter. For the Romantics, it meant beauty in decay. And for us, perhaps, it means the possibility of change. The hope that we are not prisoners of our worst instincts, that the stone can remember and we can learn. In the year 2000, the Colosseum was included in the new 7 Wonders of the World by popular vote. More than 6 million people visit it every year, making it one of the most visited monuments on Earth. They come from every country. They speak every language. They arrive in tour buses and on foot and by metro, emerging from the Colosseum station into the sudden, startling reality of the building itself. Most visitors are surprised by the color. The travertine, cleaned in recent decades, is warm, golden, honeyed. It is not the gray ruin of postcards and textbooks. In the afternoon light, it glows. They are surprised by the size. Photographs cannot capture it. You have to stand at the base of the outer wall and look up, and up, and up, to understand. 48 meters, 12 stories, the arches marching away in both directions, curving out of sight. And they are surprised by the feeling, that indefinable sense of presence that so many visitors report. A heaviness in the air, a quality of attention in the stone, as though the building is watching you, the way it has watched everyone who has ever stood within it. Some visitors feel the weight of it, the 2,000 years of stories pressed into the walls, the lives that were lived and lost within this oval of stone, the blood and the cheering and the silence that followed. Others see only an old building, a ruin, a photo opportunity, a backdrop for a selfie, and that is all right too. The Colosseum does not demand that you feel anything. It only asks that you look. There is a particular quality to the Colosseum at night, which is where we began this story and where we shall end it. The Italian government installed lighting in the 1990s, soft golden light, washing over the arches from below, picking out the texture of the travertine, the shadows of the missing stones, the dark mouths of the vomitoria where 50,000 Romans once streamed in and out. When the light is on, the Colosseum seems to float, detached from the traffic and the noise and the modern city that has grown up around it. It looks, for a moment, the way it might have looked to a traveler approaching Rome for the first time 2,000 years ago. A shape against the sky, a promise of something vast and strange and human. The traffic circles around it. The bus drivers barely glance at it. The cats that live among the ruins settle into their evening spots, on warm stones, in sheltered alcoves, the same spots that cats have probably occupied for centuries. Rome's feral cats are as much a part of the Colosseum as its arches. They move through the building with a casual ownership that no emperor ever achieved. They sleep in the vomitoria. They hunt lizards in the hypogeum. They have outlasted every attempt to relocate them. In the hours after midnight, when even the restaurants have closed, and the last tourists have gone back to their hotels, the Colosseum enters its most private hours. The lighting shifts to something softer. The traffic thins to almost nothing. A taxi passes, a scooter, then silence. This is when the building is most itself, when it is not being looked at, when it is not performing for anyone, when it is simply being. The stones cool slowly. The warmth of the day drains out of them like water from a basin. The pigeons are roosting somewhere in the upper arches, heads tucked under wings, making no sound. A cat crosses the arena floor, its paws silent on the ancient stone, following a path that is invisible to human eyes, but perfectly clear to a creature that has lived here all its life. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell strikes the hour. The sound drifts across the city and fades, and then silence again. If buildings dream, and who is to say they do not, then this is when the Colosseum dreams, not of the things that happened within it, the blood and the spectacle and the noise, but of simpler things, the weight of sunlight on stone, the slow passage of shadows across a wall, the feeling of rain, which the Colosseum has felt 10 million times, falling on its arches and running down its corridors and draining away through channels that still work after 2,000 years. It dreams of the hands that built it, thousands of hands, rough hands, calloused hands, hands that lifted stones and mixed concrete and carved columns and fitted arches, and then went home at the end of the day and washed and ate and slept and got up the next morning to do it again. Those hands are gone. They have been gone for 2,000 years, but the stone remembers their shape, the way each block was placed, the angle of each cut, the pressure of each grip. The stone remembers. There is a concept in Japanese aesthetics called wabi-sabi. It means, roughly, finding beauty in imperfection, finding depth in things that are old and worn and incomplete, a cracked bowl, a weathered fence, a garden that has been left to grow wild. The Japanese did not invent this idea. They simply gave it a name. Humans have always been moved by the beauty of old things, by the patina on bronze, by the moss on stone, by the way a building looks when it has been standing for so long that it has become part of the landscape, as natural as a hill or a tree. The Colosseum is perhaps the greatest example of this kind of beauty in the Western world. It is not beautiful because it is perfect. It is beautiful because it is broken, because the missing sections allow you to see the interior from outside, to understand the building's anatomy in a way that would be impossible if it were complete, because the pockmarked surfaces tell a story of iron clamps and desperate quarriers and centuries of human need. Because the wildflowers that still grow from the cracks are evidence of a trade in exotic animals that shaped the ecology of 3 continents. Every scar on the Colosseum is a chapter in its story. Every missing stone is a sentence in a narrative that spans 2 millennia. If the building were restored to its original condition, if every block were replaced and every statue re-erected and every surface polished to gleaming white, it would be less beautiful, not more, because it would have lost its story. And it is the story, in the end, that makes the stone worth looking at. The travertine is warm to the touch in the evening, even after the sun has set. The stone holds the heat of the day and releases it slowly, like a long, slow exhalation. If you press your palm against it, you can feel it, the warmth of a Roman afternoon, stored in stone, given back to the night. And if you are quiet and patient and willing to stand still for a moment in the dark, you might hear something. Not the roar of the crowd, not the clash of swords, not the growl of a lion rising on a wooden platform into the blinding sun. Nothing so dramatic. Just the stone settling, shifting, adjusting itself, as it has been doing for nearly 2,000 years, a faint click, a whisper of dust, the sound a building makes when it is very old and very tired and very much still here. The Colosseum has outlasted every emperor who ever sat in its seats. It has outlasted the empire that built it. It has outlasted the religion that shut it down, and the quarriers who tore it apart, and the earthquakes that shook it to its foundations. It has outlasted the botanists who catalogued its flowers, and the poets who wrote its epitaphs, and the painters who tried to capture its beauty on canvas. It remains, not because it is strong, although it is, not because it is beautiful, although it is that too, in the way that old and broken things can be beautiful. It remains because of what it represents, the ambition and the cruelty, the engineering and the artistry, the violence and the mercy, the full, complicated, contradictory span of what it means to be human. Every civilization builds monuments. Every civilization believes its monuments will last forever. Most are wrong. The Colosseum is one of the rare exceptions. It has lasted, not because the Romans built it to last, although they did, but because every generation since has found a reason to keep it. As a fortress, as a quarry, as a church, as a symbol, as a tourist attraction, as a reminder. A reminder of what we are capable of building, and a reminder of what we are capable of doing inside the things we build. 2,000 years. It is worth trying, just for a moment, to feel the weight of that number, because we say it so casually, 2,000 years, as if it were a simple measurement, like 2,000 meters or 2,000 pounds. But 2,000 years is not a measurement. It is an ocean of time so vast that the mind cannot hold it. Consider this: when Shakespeare was born in 1564, the Colosseum was already 1,484 years old. When Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the West in 800, the Colosseum was 720 years old. When Mohammed fled Mecca in 622, the Colosseum was 542 years old. The Colosseum was ancient before most of the things we call ancient had even begun. And yet it stands, weathered, broken, scarred, but standing. The same stone that Vespasian's workers laid in 70 AD is still there, still carrying weight, still doing its job. The same arches that Roman spectators walked through are still arching. The same drains that carried rainwater away from the foundations are still draining. There is a persistence in stone that humbles everything we know about human endeavor. We build our buildings and expect them to last 50 years, 100, maybe 200 if we are ambitious. The Romans built the Colosseum and it has lasted 2,000, and it shows no sign of stopping. What will the world look like when the Colosseum has stood for 3,000 years? For 4,000, will there still be a city around it? Will there still be people to visit it? Will anyone remember what it was for? We cannot know, but the stone will still be there, warm in the sun, cool in the rain, patient as ever, waiting for whoever comes next. And now the story begins to soften at the edges. The details blur like watercolor in the rain, the gladiators fade, the emperors dissolve, the roaring crowd becomes a murmur, and then a whisper, and then silence. The Colosseum stands. It has always stood. It will stand tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. The sun will rise over the Palatine Hill and warm its stones. The tourists will come with their cameras and their guidebooks. The pigeons will settle on the arches as they have for centuries. The cats will stretch and yawn and find a warm spot in the sun. And in the evening, when the light turns golden and the crowds thin and the shadows grow long across the arena floor, the building will do what it has always done. It will remember. It will remember the lake that was here before it, and the emperor who drained it, and the workers who carried the stone. It will remember the gladiators who fought on the sand, and the animals who rose from the darkness below, and the sailors who rigged the great awning against the Mediterranean sun. It will remember the monk who tried to stop the killing, and the families who made their homes in its corridors, and the noble families who turned it into a fortress, and the popes who quarried it, and the pope who saved it. It will remember the poets who came by moonlight, and the painters with their easels, and the botanist who counted 420 species of plant growing from its walls. It will remember all of them, every one, because that is what stone does when it has been shaped by human hands and soaked in human stories for 2,000 years. It remembers. And so we leave the Colosseum as we found it, standing in the dark, patient, dignified, a broken crown against the Roman sky. The night is quiet now, the story is told, the stone is warm beneath your hand. Rest now, let the images fade, let the voices drift away, let the Colosseum keep watch, as it has kept watch for nearly 2,000 years while you sleep. Good night. End of episode 1, The Colosseum, a stone that remembers. Thank you for listening, and sweet dreams. If you enjoyed this, there are more stories waiting for you.